Hello again everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to paint a Star Wars spaceship using our new real colours. In this case a 1:72 scale B-wing from Finemolds. I will be using various aviation paint colours that match the actual colours of this spaceship very well, and I will be focusing on the ship exterior most of all. Now I'm going to paint the outside of the transparent part of the cockpit. For this I will use my airbrush and a medium blue-grey colour, which is a colour that matches the one I used for the cockpit interior. The good thing about these real colours is that they can be applied straight from the pot, no additional preparation required. First of all, shake the pot, then open the lid and make the most of the dropper to add just 2 or 3 drops into the liquid cup on your airbrush. Then, using a pressure of 1.5 atmospheres, I can then start painting the cockpit exterior. There's no need to dilute the paint at all. In this case, as I said, I'm applying the paint directly to the exterior of the transparent part of the cockpit. As you can see, paint coverage is excellent. I'm only applying 1 or 2 layers to the area I want to paint, and you can see that it dries almost instantly. I've applied a base layer to the whole model now. As you can see, I've covered the entire surface. After just 20 minutes, I can hold the model in my hand without a problem. I used this light gull grey on this occasion, which is a slightly darker grey for a little more contrast. The next step is to take some masking tape, in this case 18mm tape, to change the colour in certain areas of the model based on the instructions. I will cut short pieces of tape and place it directly onto the surface without any worry about damaging the paint. For this part I'm going to use a bluish grey, this RLM 65 1938, to cover the areas I previously left free for painting. Now, just like I did previously, I'm going to take the paint straight from the pot without diluting it and drop a few drops into the fluid cap on my airbrush. As I said, without diluting it, straight from the pot. And now I can paint the areas I previously taped around. Here you can see how the model is looking at this point. Now that I have the base coat ready, the idea is to apply some highlights in the center of each one of the panels. The panels making up the surface of the fuselage. To do that, after pairing my mix in the airbrush, I can apply the highlights to each one of the panels. I've already done it on the other side, which you can see better now that it's dry, and you will notice those little patches in the center of each one of the panels, which I think add extra visual volume to the surface of my model. Again, I've already applied the masking tape for adding the squadron insignias, masking tape with round holes in it that I have applied by following the instructions for the model. To paint them, I will use a colour that is a mix of 50% orange and 50% yellow. Remember, I'm applying the paint straight from the airbrush without using any thinner. Once again, I use the same process and paint over all the circles. It dries almost instantly, and now the same can be done for all the round holes that I prepared with the tape for painting. And here is the final result after removing all the masking tape. Now the base coat is properly finished. I'm ready to start applying the weathering effects across the whole surface now. The next step is to outline all the panels with a pencil. In this case, this 0.7 pencil with an HB graphite insert. I'm going to use this to add more volume to the surface. I will repeat this whole process for all the bolts, reliefs and rivets on the whole ship. Here you can see how the surface of my spaceship is looking now that I've outlined all the panels with a pencil. To add more chromatic variety to the model, I'm going to pick a few panels and change their colour slightly. This will help the surface stand out better. For that, I'll use a much lighter colour than the base coat, in this case a 3rd generation acrylic ivory paint, which I'm going to apply using a brush. Now I'll use this sky blue to do the same in the blue areas, also with a brush. This panel is in relief, and this will help it pop both visually and chromatically from the surface of the model. Again, it doesn't matter if you go over the edges, because you can always highlight them again with the pencil like I did before once you're done. The next step is to create some texture on the model by simulating paint chips at the top of each panel. You can see here that I've finished those effects on the upper front corners, and the paint degradation effect is excellent. Make sure to consider the direction of your overhead light source whenever you do this. Now I'll do the same thing but with the blue areas using a much lighter blue colour. In this case another 3G paint, sky blue, and again on the front edge of each panel to create a paint chipping effect. Remember to always bear in mind the supposed direction of movement your ship is moving in, because that is where you will want to create the most chipping effects on your panels. The next step is to pick a colour, a very dark grey, for painting all the armaments on the ship. Now, using a slightly lighter colour, I will use an AK brush for some dry brushing technique. Add paint to the brush and remove any excess on some paper or a napkin. This highlights all the volumes making up the cannons very well. It's a very simple technique that anyone can do using this kind of brush. The more times you go over an area, the lighter it will become. So I'm going to repeat this same process from every angle. You don't need to continuously add more paint to the brush because you actually use very little doing this. I'm going to finish this step on all the areas I painted grey before, such as this engine grille here for example. Now I'm going to apply the watercolour pencils technique. I will start with a dark grey and, as you can see, simply draw on some small scratches across the surface of my model. Always on the front edges. You might then want to complement this with another darker colour, in this case I'm using black, to add more depth to this effect. Can you see what I mean? And always do this on the front edges, based on the direction of movement for your model. Now my model is ready to be varnished. You can see that I've finished all my weathering effects. So I will need to prepare a mix of 50% thinner for real colours and 50% gloss varnish. I will be applying that mix using my airbrush. Without stopping and in nice even movements across the surface like this. Here you can see how my model looks now it has been completely varnished. The good thing about this layer of varnish is that it protects all the techniques I've applied up until this point. Now it's ready for the next step, which is to apply the washes. Now that my model is ready, I have one lid here with the grey wash and another with a brown one. I'm going to take the grey wash here and apply it directly to a line on a panel. As you can see, the product runs the length of the gap and highlights it perfectly. The more you use, the more clearly it will be highlighted. Again, it doesn't matter if you use too much, because later on, once the product is dry, we'll be removing any surplus. And this is how it looks after applying these two washes. The result is superb. As I said, it doesn't matter if you go over the edges because this is a general wash. Once the product is dry, you can take a piece of cloth or a piece of paper and remove any excess using small circular motions like this. You can see that as you remove the excess, all the panels are highlighted perfectly now. Now that I've removed all the excess brown and grey wash that I applied before, this is how my model is looking. I'll add some drops of water and then open the ink pot here carefully because it comes with a dropper, and add the same number of drops of ink for a mix that is approximately 50-50. Then shake your airbrush so the water and the ink mix properly, and then, well, you can see here the consistency after I shake it properly. Then take your model like this and make this kind of movement with your airbrush in the direction of supposed airflow to start leaving slight markings like I'm doing here. Now I'm going to do the same thing but with the black ink in the same direction, using the same airbrush movement and the same dilution. Always from front to back in a very fast motion, just like this. Once the ink has dried, it's completely matte and it helps to create the final effect I'm looking for. So I'm almost finished now, and it's time to add a final layer of varnish, in this case a matte varnish, and I'm using a 3rd generation acrylic. I'm gently applying a coat of varnish to the entire surface of my model. So that's it, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this step-by-step video on how to paint and apply weathering effects to a 1:72 scale Star Wars B-Wing from Finemolds. I think it turned out nicely. I hope you enjoyed this video and stay tuned for more. Goodbye!